Eliza Hartford's knees buckled on the frozen ridge, her vision blurring white. 40 miles behind her lay Philadelphia and a dead husband's debts. Ahead through the screaming wind, one last ranch house flickered with lamplight. Her fingernails were black from frostbite. Her boots had holes worn through the soles. She'd walked for 6 days with nothing but frozen creek water and stolen bread. This was her last chance. She crawled the final 100 yards and knocked 3 times before collapsing on Jake Mercer's porch, blood seeping through her torn stockings onto virgin snow. Before we continue Eliza's story, if you love tales of second chances and courage in the face of impossible odds, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Stay with us until the very end to see how this desperate woman's gamble changes everything. And comment below with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far Eliza's story travels across this beautiful country of ours. Now let's begin where most stories end, with a woman who has nothing left to lose. Jake Mercer heard the knocking through his whiskey haze. 3 knocks. Firm, deliberate, then silence. He set down his glass and stared at the door. It was past 9 o'clock on a December night in 1878, and the Wyoming wind howled like something dying. Nobody traveled after dark in weather like this. Nobody sane, anyway. The knocking came again. Weaker this time. Jake grabbed his rifle, old habits from the war, and opened the door. A woman lay crumpled on his porch like a broken bird. Her coat, threadbare and soaked through, clung to a frame so thin he could count her ribs through the fabric. Dark auburn hair had come loose from its braid, plastered across a face pale as death. Blood stained the snow beneath her knees. Jesus Christ. Jake dropped the rifle and knelt beside her. Her eyes fluttered open. Hazel, he noticed. The color of autumn leaves before they fall. I'm looking for work, she whispered. Any kind you'll give me. Then she fainted. Jake carried her inside. She weighed nothing, just bones and desperation, and laid her on the settee by the fire. Her clothes were frozen stiff. Her lips had gone blue. Frostbite blackened 3 of her fingers. He'd seen men die of exposure in the war. Seen them freeze in their bedrolls, wake up screaming as their toes turned gangrenous. This woman was maybe an hour from that same fate. Tommy! Jake shouted toward the back room. Thomas Chen appeared in the doorway. Suspenders hanging loose hair, sleep must. He was 24, quick-minded, and the best ranch hand Jake had ever hired. Also, the only one willing to work for a man the town called Mercer the Hermit. Tommy took one look at the woman and swore in Cantonese. Get me blankets, Jake ordered. Hot water, whiskey if we've got it. We ain't got whiskey, you drank it. Then make coffee, strong enough to strip paint. While Tommy worked the stove, Jake peeled off the woman's frozen coat. Beneath it, she wore a dress that had once been fine Philadelphia tailoring. Probably, but was now torn and stained with mud, and God knew what else. Her boots had holes worn clean through. Her stockings were more blood than fabric. Who is she? Tommy asked, returning with blankets. Don't know. She asked for work, then passed out. In this weather, she walked here. Jake nodded grimly. The nearest town was Laramie, 15 miles south. 15 miles in good weather was a hard walk. In a blizzard, it was suicide. He wrapped her in blankets and forced lukewarm coffee between her lips. She coughed, choked, but swallowed. Her eyes opened again. Easy, Jake said. You're safe. She tried to sit up. Failed. Work, she managed. I can work. I can cook, clean, mend. You can freeze to death if you don't shut up and drink this. She stared at him, startled by his bluntness. Then slowly she took the cup in shaking hands and drank. Jake sat back on his heels, studying her. Late 20s, maybe 30. Educated, judging by the way she spoke. Desperate, judging by the fact that she'd nearly killed herself walking to his ranch in a blizzard. What's your name? He asked. Eliza Hartford. Where you from, Eliza Hartford? Philadelphia. Long way from home. I don't have a home. Her voice was flat, empty of everything except exhaustion. Jake understood that particular emptiness. He'd lived with it for 3 years, ever since Margaret had left him, with nothing but a note that said, "I can't breathe out here." "You got people in Laramie?" he asked. "No." "Friends, family?" "No." "Then what in God's name made you walk 15 miles through a blizzard to knock on a stranger's door?" Eliza looked at him with those autumn leaf eyes, and for a moment he saw straight through to the bottom of her. Saw the fear and the pride warring in her. Saw the desperation that came from being out of choices, but not out of fight. "Because I heard you were the kind of man who judges a person by their work, not their past," she said quietly. "And I need someone to judge me by what I can do, not what I've lost." The words hung in the warm air between them. Tommy coughed. "Boss, she needs a doctor." "Ain't no doctor coming out in this storm." "Then what do we do?" Jake looked at the woman at Eliza and made a decision that would change everything. "We let her stay." By morning, the storm had buried the ranch in 3 feet of snow. Jake woke before dawn, as he always did, and checked on Eliza. She was still asleep, curled beneath the blankets like a child. In the firelight, with her face relaxed, she looked younger, softer. He turned away before that thought could take root. In the kitchen, Tommy had coffee ready and bacon sizzling. "She's still breathing?" Tommy asked. "Yeah." "What are you gonna do with her?" "Don't know yet." "Can't keep her here, boss. Town finds out you got a single woman living under your roof, they'll crucify you." Jake poured coffee black and bitter. "Town can go to hell. Town controls your credit, your supplies, your reputation." "My reputation's already dirt." "Yeah, but it can get dirtier." Tommy flipped the bacon. "I'm just saying be careful. You remember what happened with Margaret." Jake's jaw tightened. He remembered. Remembered the whispers, the sideways looks, the way Nathaniel Graves had stood in the middle of Main Street and called him a poor excuse for a husband. Remembered how the whole damn town had agreed. "This is different," Jake said. "How?" "Because I ain't asking her to marry me. I'm just giving her work." "Yeah, well, folks won't see it that way." Before Jake could respond, Eliza appeared in the doorway. She'd managed to stand, though she swayed like a sapling in wind. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, and without the coat, he could see how thin she really was. Hungry thin. Desperate thin. "I can start now," she said. "Whatever you need." "You can start by sitting down before you fall down," Jake replied. "I don't take charity." "Ain't charity. It's common sense. You're no good to me dead." Eliza hesitated, pride and pragmatism fighting in her eyes. Finally, pragmatism won. She sank into a chair at the kitchen table. Tommy set a plate in front of her. Bacon, eggs, bread. She stared at it like it might vanish. "Eat," Jake said. She picked up the fork with shaking hands and took one bite. Then another. Then she was crying, tears streaming down her face as she ate. And Jake had to look away because the sight of it, of someone so grateful for basic food, made something crack open in his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Jake said gruffly. "You ain't heard the terms." After breakfast, Jake laid it out plain. "You want work, you got it. Cooking, cleaning, mending. I'll pay you $2 a week plus room and board. You sleep in the spare room off the kitchen. Door locks from the inside. You got a problem with me or Tommy? You say so and it stops. Understood?" Eliza nodded. "I don't abide laziness, lying, or quitting. Winter's hard out here. Days start before dawn and end after dark. Stock needs tending, fences need mending, and this house needs a woman's touch because I sure as hell ain't providing it." "I understand. One more thing." Jake leaned forward, his voice hard. "Town's gonna talk. They're gonna say things about you, about me, about what we're doing out here. I don't give a damn what they say, but you might. So I'm asking now, can you handle it? Eliza met his eyes without flinching. I've been called worse than they can imagine. I can handle it. Why? Why what? Why you running? What happened in Philadelphia? Her face went carefully blank. That's my business. It becomes my business if it follows you here. For a long moment she said nothing. Then slowly she spoke. My husband died 6 months ago. He left debts, a lot of them. Men came to collect. They took everything, the house, the furniture, my mother's silver. They said I could work off what remained. Her voice went cold. I knew what kind of work they meant, so I left. Jake's hands curled into fists. He knew exactly what kind of work those bastards had meant. You got any skills? He asked, gentler now. I can read and write, do figures. I worked in my father's bookshop before I married. Can you teach? Eliza blinked, surprised. Teach what? Reading, writing. Tommy never learned proper. Neither did the other hands when they're here. Winter's long. Might as well use it for something useful. Something flickered in Eliza's eyes. Hope, maybe, or purpose. I can teach, she said softly. I'd like that. Jake nodded. Then we got a deal. He held out his hand. She took it. Her palm was torn and blistered, her grip weak, but she didn't let go until he did. Welcome to the Mercer Ranch, Eliza Hartford, Jake said. God help us both. The first week was brutal. Eliza threw herself into work like a woman possessed. She scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled. She mended every torn shirt, patched every holey sock. She cooked meals that were simple, but good stews, bread pies made from preserved apples. Jake watched her from a distance, wary and confused. She moved through the house like a ghost, never speaking unless spoken to, never sitting unless the work was done. At night, he heard her crying through the thin walls. Soft, muffled sobs that she thought no one could hear. He didn't know what to do with that. Didn't know how to help someone who was so determined not to need help. On the 8th day, he found her in the barn, struggling to lift a bale of hay. She was too weak, too small, but she kept trying anyway, her face red with effort. Leave it, Jake said. I can do it. Eliza, leave it. She spun on him, eyes flashing. I'm not useless. I can work. I can... Her voice broke. She sagged against the hay bale, breathing hard. Jake stepped closer, careful like approaching a spooked horse. Nobody said you were useless, he said quietly. But you've been half-starved for months. You ain't gonna build back your strength in a week, so stop trying to kill yourself proving something nobody asked you to prove. Eliza looked at him, tears streaming down her face. I have to earn this, she whispered. I have to earn the right to stay. You already earned it. First night you knocked on my door, half frozen and bleeding, and still had the grit to ask for work instead of begging for charity. You earned it then. She stared at him, disbelieving. I mean it, Jake said. You got more spine than half the men I served with, so stop trying to prove yourself and just be. Eliza wiped her eyes roughly. I don't know how to just be anymore. Then learn. You got time. That night, the first reading lesson happened. Tommy sat at the kitchen table, looking uncomfortable. Eliza had set out a primer paper and a pencil. I ain't never been good at this, Tommy muttered. Everyone starts somewhere, Eliza said gently. Let's start with your name. Can you write it? Tommy scratched out T-O-M, then stopped. It's T-H-O-M-A-S, Eliza said. The H is silent. Then why's it there? English is complicated. Tommy grunted. Damn complicated. Jake watched from the doorway, coffee in hand. Eliza's whole demeanor had changed. Teaching, she was confident, patient, alive in a way she wasn't when she was scrubbing floors. She caught him watching and smiled. A real smile, small and hesitant, but genuine. Something in Jake's chest tightened. He retreated to his room and lay in the dark listening to Eliza's soft voice as she guided Tommy through the alphabet. Outside, the wind howled. Snow fell in thick, silent sheets. And for the first time in 3 years, Jake Mercer's house felt like something other than a tomb. On Sunday, Jake rode into Laramie for supplies. He tied his horse outside Garrett's general store and stepped inside. Bessie Garrett looked up from behind the counter. She was 58, broad-shouldered, with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Jake Mercer," she said. "Ain't seen you in a month." "Been busy. Heard you hired a woman." Word traveled fast. Faster than snow, faster than truth. "Hired a housekeeper," Jake corrected. Bessie raised an eyebrow. "That what we're calling it?" "That's what it is." "Folks are talking." "Folks always talk." Bessie leaned across the counter, her voice low. "Nathaniel Graves came in here yesterday asking questions. Said it ain't proper a single man and a single woman living under the same roof. Said the church council's concerned." Jake's jaw tightened. "Graves can shove his concern up his—" "Jake." Bessie's voice was sharp. "I ain't the enemy here. I'm telling you because you need to know. Graves has influence. He can make your life hell if he wants to. He already made my life hell when Margaret left. Then he can make it worse. Be smart about this." Jake paid for his supplies, flour coffee nails, and loaded them onto his horse. As he prepared to leave, Bessie called out, "Jake, that woman, is she good to you?" He turned surprised. "She works hard," he said carefully. "Minds her business, doesn't complain." "That ain't what I asked." Jake thought about Eliza's tears in the barn, about the way she smiled when she taught Tommy to read, about the sound of her crying through the walls at night. "She's trying," he said finally. "Trying to put herself back together. I reckon that's all any of us can do." Bessie nodded slowly. "Then you protect her, you hear me? Because Graves and his kind, they'll tear her apart just to prove they can." Jake rode home through the gathering dark, Bessie's words echoing in his mind. When he arrived, the house glowed with lamplight. Inside, Eliza had supper ready: venison stew, biscuits, coffee. Tommy was at the table, laboriously writing his name on a piece of paper. "Look, boss." Tommy held up the paper. "I wrote it right this time." Eliza beamed. "He's a natural." Jake set down his supplies and hung his coat. The house smelled like food and warmth. It smelled like home, and that terrified him. "Town's talking," he said abruptly. Eliza's smile faded. "I know. Might get ugly. I can handle ugly. Can you handle Nathaniel Graves because he's the one stirring the pot?" Eliza paled slightly, but her voice stayed steady. "Who's Nathaniel Graves?" "Banker, church deacon, self-appointed moral authority of Laramie." Jake poured himself coffee. "He's got influence. He can make trouble." "Then I'll leave," Eliza said quietly. "I won't let my presence ruin your reputation." "To hell with my reputation, Jake." "I said to hell with it." His voice was harsh. "I made a deal with you. I don't break deals. If Graves has a problem, he can take it up with me." Eliza stared at him, something like wonder in her eyes. Tommy cleared his throat. "Maybe we should all just eat supper before it gets cold." They ate in silence, the weight of unspoken things pressing down on them. Outside, the first wolves of winter began to howl. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Margaret. About how she'd hated the isolation, the cold, the endless work. About how she'd looked at him the day she left with pity and exhaustion and relief. "I can't breathe out here," she'd said. "I'm suffocating." Eliza wasn't Margaret. Eliza didn't complain. Didn't ask for things he couldn't give. She just worked quietly and determinedly, like she was trying to earn her right to exist. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Around midnight, he heard a noise, a crash followed by a muffled cry. Jake grabbed his rifle and bolted into the hallway. Eliza stood in the kitchen, surrounded by shattered pottery. She was shaking, eyes wide with terror. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I didn't mean, I just wanted water. I'm sorry." "Eliza, it's fine. I'll clean it up. I'll replace it. I'm sorry." She was crying again, her whole body trembling. Jake set down the rifle and approached slowly. "Eliza, look at me." She did, tears streaming down her face. "It's just a bowl," he said gently. "I got a dozen more. It don't matter." "Everything matters," she whispered. "Every mistake, every failure, it all matters." "Who told you that?" "My husband." Jake's hands curled into fists. "Your husband was wrong." Eliza shook her head, backing away. "You don't understand. If I mess up, if I'm not perfect, then I don't deserve— Deserve what? Anything. Kindness, safety, a place to sleep, food. I have to earn it all every single day, or what? Or I lose it." Her voice broke. "Or I lose everything again." Jake stared at this woman, this brave, broken woman, and something inside him shifted. "Listen to me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You ain't gotta earn basic human decency. You ain't gotta be perfect to deserve kindness. And you sure as hell don't gotta punish yourself for breaking a damn bowl." Eliza sobbed, her hands covering her face. Jake did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened, then collapsed against him, crying into his chest. He held her awkwardly, uncertain, but he didn't let go. "You're safe here," he murmured. "I promise. You're safe." They stood like that for a long time. Two broken people clinging to each other in the dark. And outside the wolves howled. Closer now. Always closer. The morning after Eliza broke the bowl, Jake woke to find her already in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with a fierce concentration that told him she was trying to work off shame. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her hands moved with practiced efficiency. "You don't have to do that," Jake said from the doorway. "Bread doesn't make itself." "Eliza." "I'm fine." Her voice was clipped, professional. The walls were back up. "Coffee's ready. Tommy already fed the chickens. I'll have breakfast on the table in 20 minutes. Jake opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Some people needed their walls just to get through the day. He poured coffee and went to check the stock. Outside, the world was crystallized in white. Snow had fallen through the night, covering everything in a blanket so pure it hurt to look at. The cattle huddled together for warmth in the near pasture, their breath clouding in the bitter air. Jake counted heads 42 and noted which ones looked thin. Winter was just getting started, and already he could see it would be a hard one. Tommy emerged from the barn hauling hay. "She okay?" Tommy asked quietly. "She's building walls again." "Can't blame her. Whatever happened back in Philadelphia, it broke something in her." Jake thought about the way Eliza had trembled in his arms, apologizing for a broken bowl, like it was the end of the world. Thought about her husband, the bastard who'd taught her that mistakes meant losing everything. "We need to go easy on her," Jake said. "You're the one she's scared of disappointing." "What?" Tommy gave him a knowing look. "Boss, she watches you like you're gonna change your mind any second, like she's waiting for you to tell her to leave. I wouldn't do that." "You know that. I know that. But she don't know that. Not in her bones." Tommy hefted another bale. "My ma used to say some scars run so deep you can't see them. But that don't mean they ain't bleeding." That afternoon, Nathaniel Graves came calling. Jake was mending fence line when he saw the horse approaching. Black gelding, expensive tack rider, sitting ramrod straight in the saddle like he had a poker up his spine. Graves. Jake set down his tools and waited. Nathaniel Graves was 42 years old, thin as whipcord, with pale blue eyes that held all the warmth of a January creek. He wore a black suit, even in the snow, carried a Bible in his saddlebag, and had the particular self-righteousness of a man who believed God agreed with every word he said. "Mercer," Graves said by way of greeting. "Graves." "Might I have a word? You're having one now." Graves dismounted with the careful precision of someone who did everything carefully and precisely. He approached Jake with measured steps, his boots crunching in the snow. "I've come as a friend," Graves said. "We ain't friends." "Then as a concerned member of the community." Graves's smile was thin as paper. "I've heard you've taken in a woman, a stranger from Philadelphia with no references, no family, no reputation to speak of. I hired a housekeeper. That's my business. It becomes the community's business when it affects the moral character of our town." Jake's jaw tightened. "How's my housekeeper affecting anybody's moral character?" "A single woman living under the roof of a single man, unsupervised, unchaperoned." Graves shook his head sadly. "It invites speculation, Mercer. Invites gossip. Invites sin. The only sin I see is you riding out here in a snowstorm to stick your nose where it don't belong. I'm trying to help you. You've already suffered one failed marriage. Your reputation is fragile. If you persist in this arrangement, you'll find doors closing, credit drying up, the town turning its back." Jake stepped closer, and Graves actually took a step back. "Let me make something real clear." Jake said, his voice low and dangerous. "That woman works harder than any hand I've ever hired. She don't complain, don't make trouble, and don't deserve to be gossiped about by people who don't know a damn thing about her. So you can take your concern and your speculation and your moral righteousness, and you can ride back to town with them, because I don't want them, and I sure as hell don't need them." Graves's face had gone white, then red. "You're making a mistake, Mercer. A grave mistake. Wouldn't be my first. Won't be my last. The church council can go to hell along with you." Graves stared at Jake for a long moment, something cold and calculating in his eyes. Then he smiled a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "Very well. But when this all falls apart, when that woman's true nature reveals itself, don't come crying to the town for sympathy. You made your bed. You can lie in it." He mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. Jake stood in the snow, his hands shaking with suppressed rage. He'd seen men like Graves before, self-appointed guardians of other people's virtue. They talked about morality and righteousness, but what they really wanted was control. They wanted everyone to live small, scared lives that fit into neat little boxes they could label and approve. Jake had stopped living in boxes when he'd buried Margaret's goodbye letter. He returned to the house to find Eliza standing at the window, her face pale. "I heard," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. I should leave before I cause more trouble." "You ain't leaving." "Jake, he's going to destroy you. Your reputation, your business." "My reputation was destroyed when Margaret left. My business survives because I work harder than God himself. And you—" Jake paused, searching for the right words. "You got nothing to apologize for. Nothing." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you doing this? Why are you protecting me?" "Because somebody should have protected you a long time ago." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Eliza turned away, pressing her hand to her mouth. "I don't know how to let people be kind to me," she whispered. "I don't know how to believe it's real." "Then learn, same way Tommy's learning to read, one day at a time." December bled into January. The cold deepened until the mornings hurt to breathe. Ice formed in thick sheets on every surface. The cattle grew gaunt despite Jake's best efforts with hay. And inside the ranch house, something fragile and precious began to grow. Eliza taught Tommy to read every evening after supper. She started with simple words, cat, dog, sun, snow, and gradually built up to sentences. Tommy struggled, cursed, threw down his pencil more than once, but Eliza never lost patience. "Read it again," she'd say gently. "Sound it out. THECOW. Jumped. Over. The moon." Tommy looked up triumphant. "I did it." "You did." Eliza clapped her hands, genuinely delighted. "Now write it." Jake watched these lessons from his chair by the fire, pretending to read his own book, but really just listening to Eliza's voice. She came alive when she taught. The fear left her eyes. The tension left her shoulders. She became someone whole, and confident, and beautiful. That last thought scared him more than he wanted to admit. One night after Tommy had gone to bed, Eliza lingered at the table, organizing her teaching materials. "He's doing well," Jake said. "He's smart. He just never had the chance to learn properly." "That's your doing. You're a good teacher." Eliza glanced at him, surprised. "Thank you. I used to dream about opening a school, back in Philadelphia, before everything fell apart." "What stopped you?" "I got married." Her voice went flat. "My husband said teaching was beneath me, said a wife's place was in the home, managing the household, hosting dinners, being decorative." "Sounds like your husband was a fool." Eliza smiled sadly. "He was a lot of things. Fool was probably the kindest." Jake wanted to ask more, wanted to understand what had happened to her, what had driven her to walk 40 miles through a blizzard, but he could see the walls going up in her eyes. So instead he said, "You could still open a school. Out here, lots of ranch kids never get proper education. Who would send their children to be taught by a woman with no reputation? People who care more about their kids learning than about gossip." Eliza looked at him for a long moment, something like hope flickering in her eyes. "You really believe that?" "I do." She nodded, slowly gathering her papers. "Good night, Jake." "Good night, Eliza." She paused at the doorway. "Jake, thank you. For everything. For giving me a chance when nobody else would. You earned it." After she left, Jake sat alone in the dark, staring at the dying fire. He was in dangerous territory. He knew it. Knew that the way his heart lifted when Eliza smiled was a warning sign. Knew that the way he listened for her footsteps in the morning meant he was getting attached. And attachment led to loss. Always. The wolves came back on a Tuesday night. Jake woke to the sound of chickens screaming. He grabbed his rifle and ran outside in his long johns and boots, the cold hitting him like a fist. 3 wolves circled the chicken coop, eyes reflecting lamplight like coins. They were thin, starving thin, and desperate enough to risk getting close to human habitation. Jake fired a warning shot. The wolves scattered back, but didn't flee. "Get out of here." He fired again, this time closer. Behind him, the door opened. Eliza stood there in her nightgown and coat, holding Tommy's rifle. "Get back inside," Jake ordered. "Not a chance." She moved beside him, raising the rifle with practiced ease. "You know how to shoot that." "My father taught me. Said a woman alone needs to know how to stand her ground." A wolf lunged toward the coop. Eliza fired, hitting the ground 6 inches from its paws. The wolf yelped and retreated. Jake fired again, herding the pack toward the tree line. Eliza covered his flank, her shots deliberate and well-placed. Together, they made enough noise to finally drive the wolves into the hills. When the silence returned, they stood side by side in the snow, breath-clouding rifles lowered. "Well," Jake said, "that's one way to wake up." Eliza laughed, a real laugh, surprised and a little wild. "I've never shot at wolves before." "You did good." "I was terrified." "So was I." She looked at him, her eyes bright in the lamplight. "Somehow I doubt that. You seem like the kind of man who doesn't scare easy." "Everyone scares Eliza. Brave ain't about not being scared. It's about doing what needs doing anyway." She nodded slowly. "Like you standing up to Nathaniel Graves. Like you walking 40 miles through a blizzard to ask for work." They stood there a moment longer, the cold, forgotten something unspoken passing between them. Then Tommy appeared in the doorway, hair sticking up in all directions. "What in the Sam Hill is going on out here?" he demanded. "Wolves," Jake said. "We handled it." Tommy looked between them, noted their proximity, the way they stood shoulder to shoulder, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Yeah," he said. "I bet you did." The next morning, Jake rode into Laramie for supplies and found the town buzzing with fresh gossip. He heard it in fragments as he walked down Main Street, whispers that cut off when he passed, knowing looks exchanged behind hands. At Garrett's General Store, Bessie greeted him with a grim expression. "It's bad, Jake." "What is?" "Graves is telling everyone you and that woman were seen together in the middle of the night. In your night clothes. Alone." Jake's hands curled into fists. "We were protecting the livestock from wolves." "I know that. You know that. But Graves is painting it as something else entirely." Bessie leaned closer. "He's calling for a town meeting. Says it's time the community address the moral decay in their midst." Jesus Christ. He's got people worked up, Jake. The church ladies are ready to run her out of town on a rail. Jake gathered his supplies in grim silence. As he paid, Bessie caught his wrist. "Be careful," she said quietly. "Graves is dangerous when he thinks God's on his side, and right now he's convinced he's doing the Lord's work." Jake rode home through the bitter cold, his mind racing. He'd underestimated Graves, thought the man would bluster and threaten, but ultimately back down. Instead, Graves was escalating, rallying the town against Eliza, like she was some kind of threat to their very souls. When he arrived home, he found Eliza in the kitchen, kneading bread again. Always bread when she was upset. "How bad?" she asked without looking up. "Graves is calling a town meeting." Her hands stilled. "To talk about me. To talk about us. Then I have to leave. Tonight. Before this gets worse." "No. Jake. I won't let you sacrifice everything for me. Your ranch, your livelihood, your—" I said no. His voice was hard. "You run, now you'll be running forever. And I'll be damned if I let Nathaniel Graves and his moral crusade drive a good woman out of her home. This isn't my home." "Isn't it?" Eliza looked at him, and something cracked in her carefully maintained composure. I can't let myself believe that. Every time I believe somewhere is home, it gets taken away." Jake crossed the room and took her flour-dusted hands in his. "Then maybe it's time to stop running," he said quietly. "Maybe it's time to stand and fight. I don't know how to fight men like Graves." "You don't have to. That's what I'm for." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why do you care so much? I'm nobody. Just a broken woman with nothing to offer." "You're not nobody." Jake's voice was rough with emotion. "You're brave and strong, and you teach Tommy to read even though you're exhausted. You stand next to me against wolves even though you're scared. You make this house feel like something worth coming home to." Eliza stared at him, breathing hard. "Jake." He let go of her hands and stepped back, suddenly aware he'd said too much. "I'm going to that town meeting, and I'm going to tell them exactly what I think of their moral judgment. You don't have to come. In fact, I'd rather you didn't. But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "That you won't run. That you'll be here when I get back." Eliza wiped her eyes. "You really think standing up to them will change anything?" "I don't know. But I know that if I don't stand up, if I let them bully you into leaving, I'll hate myself for the rest of my life. And I've already got enough regrets to last me." She nodded slowly. "I'll be here. Promise me." "I promise." The town meeting was held in the church on a Friday night. Every seat was filled. Every face turned as Jake walked in his boots loud on the wooden floor. Nathaniel Graves stood at the pulpit looking every inch the righteous defender of community values. Beside him, Reverend Samuel Price looked uncomfortable, like a man caught between conscience and congregation. "Ah, Mr. Mercer," Graves said smoothly. How good of you to join us. We were just discussing the matter of propriety and Christian conduct. Were you? Jake walked to the front, turned to face the crowd. Then let's discuss it proper. Martha Davis, the mayor's wife, stood up. Mr. Mercer, we're all concerned about the situation at your ranch. A single woman living unsupervised with 2 men. 3 bedrooms, 3 people, all with locks on the doors. Jake interrupted. What exactly is the situation you're concerned about? The appearance of impropriety, Graves said. In a Christian community, we must be above reproach. Caesar's wife must be... Eliza Hartford ain't Caesar's wife. She's a housekeeper. She cooks, cleans, teaches Tommy to read, and works harder than half the men in this room. What she don't do is deserve your gossip or your judgment. But surely you can see how it looks, another woman called out. A woman of unknown character, no references, no family. She's a widow, Jake said flatly. Her child died of diphtheria. Her husband left her with debts she couldn't pay. She walked 40 miles through a blizzard because she was desperate enough to risk dying rather than accepting the kind of work men in Philadelphia offered her. That's her character, that's her reference, and if that ain't good enough for you, then maybe you should examine your own character a little closer. The room erupted in whispers. Graves held up his hand for silence. Mr. Mercer, no one disputes that Mrs. Hartford may have suffered hardship. But hardship doesn't excuse inappropriate behavior. And the fact remains, you and she were seen together in the middle of the night in your nightclothes alone. We were protecting livestock from wolves, Jake's voice rang out. Or should I have let the wolves eat the chickens so nobody's delicate sensibilities got offended? There's no need for sarcasm. There's every need. You want to talk about Christian conduct? Then let's talk about how Christ treated women who were judged by their communities. Let's talk about casting first stones. Let's talk about loving your neighbor instead of gossiping about them. Reverend Price shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Mercer makes a point. The point, Graves cut in, is that we have standards in this community. Standards that maintain order and decency. And when those standards are violated, what standard am I violating? Working hard, giving someone a job when they needed one, treating a person with basic human dignity. You're violating the standard of propriety. Then maybe your standard's wrong. The words hung in the air like smoke. Graves's face had gone red. Mr. Mercer, if you persist in this defiance, you'll find yourself isolated from this community. No credit, no trade, no fellowship. Is that really what you want? Jake looked around the room, saw faces he'd known for years, saw judgment, fear, and just a few expressions of sympathy. If fellowship means throwing a good woman to the wolves because you're scared of what people might think, then no, I don't want it. I'll take isolation over hypocrisy any day. He turned and walked out, the silence behind him, deafening. Outside, the cold hit him like salvation. He mounted his horse and rode into the night, his heart hammering, his hands shaking with rage and adrenaline, and something that might have been exhilaration. He'd burned his bridges, cut himself off from the town, and he didn't regret it one bit. When Jake arrived home, he found Eliza sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee. She looked up when he entered, her eyes searching his face. "How bad?" she asked. "I told them to go to hell." "Jake, I don't regret it." He pulled off his coat, hung it carefully. "I'm done living by their rules, done apologizing for doing the right thing." Eliza stood cross to him. "You just destroyed your reputation for me." "I destroyed it for us both, for the principle that people deserve to be judged by their actions, not by gossip. They'll make your life impossible. They'll try, but I've survived worse. We'll manage." Eliza reached out, touched his face gently. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met, or the most foolish. Probably both." She smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "Thank you, for standing up when you didn't have to. For choosing me when it would have been easier not to." Jake covered her hand with his, feeling the calluses she'd earned working his ranch. "Eliza, I need you to understand something. This ain't charity. This ain't pity. I'm choosing you because you're worth choosing. Because you make this place better. Because when I ride home through the cold, I know there's warmth waiting. And I ain't had that in a long time." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of believing this is real. Of letting myself feel safe. Because every time I've felt safe before everything fell apart." "Then we'll build something that don't fall apart." Jake's voice was rough. "Something strong enough to weather storms and gossip and whatever else comes our way." "How?" "Same way you build anything worth having. One day at a time. One choice at a time. Starting with choosing to stay." Eliza nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I choose to stay." Jake pulled her into his arms and she clung to him, like he was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid and uncertain. Outside, the wind howled. The wolves sang their lonely songs. And inside, two broken people held each other and chose against all odds and reason to try being whole. The next morning brought consequences swifter than Jake had anticipated. He rode into town at dawn to settle his account at the feed store, only to find the door locked, despite the open sign hanging in the window. Through the glass, he could see Martin Wheeler inside, deliberately looking away. Jake knocked. No answer. He knocked harder. Wheeler finally came to the door, but didn't unlock it. "Sorry, Mercer," Wheeler called through the glass. "Can't do business with you no more. I got cash money, same as always. Ain't about money. It's about principles." Wheeler's face was apologetic but firm. "Graves made it clear anyone who does business with you is condoning your behavior. I got a family to think about. Can't afford to be on the wrong side of this." Jake's jaw tightened. "So that's how it is. That's how it is. I'm sorry." Jake rode to 3 more establishments. The blacksmith, the general store, even the saloon. Same story everywhere. Doors locked. Eyes averted. The town had made its choice, and Jake Mercer was on the outside. At Garrett's general store, Bessie at least had the decency to meet him at the door. "I can't serve you inside," she said quietly. "But I can leave a crate out back tonight. Flour, coffee beans, whatever you need. Just leave the money under the loose board by the pump." "Bessie, I know what it's like to be cast out, Jake. When my husband died and left me with debts, this town wanted to lock me up in the poorhouse. Said a woman had no business running a store. But I did it anyway, and I survived. You will too." She pressed a worn piece of paper into his hand. "List of supplies I can get you." Discreetly. Jake looked at the list, his throat tight. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. Graves won't stop until he's broken you completely." She was right. Over the next week, the isolation intensified. The bank called in Jake's line of credit not due for another 3 months, but Graves found a technicality in the contract. The cattle broker who usually bought Jake's stock sent word he wouldn't be purchasing this spring. Even the traveling doctor who made rounds every month skipped Jake's ranch entirely. Tommy noticed the tension first. "Boss, we're running low on grain for the chickens," he said one evening. "And that fence in the north pasture won't hold much longer. We need wire." "I know. How we gonna get supplies if nobody'll sell to us?" Bessie's helping, quietly. "That ain't gonna be enough come spring. We need seed tools, medicine for the stock." "I know." Jake's voice was sharper than he intended. He rubbed his face, exhausted. "I know, Tommy. I'm working on it." Eliza, who'd been washing dishes, turned around. "This is my fault. If I leave—" "You ain't leaving." Jake stood abruptly. "I'm going to bed." He retreated to his room and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The walls were closing in. He'd thought standing up to Graves was the right thing, the brave thing. But bravery didn't pay bills, didn't feed cattle, didn't keep a ranch running when the entire town turned its back. Maybe he'd been a fool after all. Through the thin walls, he heard Eliza crying again, soft, muffled sobs that she tried to hide. He pressed his hands over his face, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. He'd promised to protect her. Instead, he'd made everything worse. The blizzard hit on the first week of February, a monster storm that came screaming out of the north with winds that could strip flesh from bone. Jake woke to a world erased by white. He couldn't see 10 feet beyond the porch. The cattle were somewhere out in the far pasture 2 miles distant, and if he didn't get feed to them soon, they'd freeze or starve. "I'm going out," he told Tommy and Eliza at breakfast. "Not alone you ain't." Tommy was already pulling on his heaviest coat. "Tommy, you stay here. Keep the fires going. If you don't come back, I'll have to explain to Eliza why I let you go alone. No thank you." Tommy grabbed the spare rifle. "Besides, you need someone to watch your back." "I'm coming too." Eliza stood, her face set with determination. "Absolutely not. Those cattle feed all of us. That makes this my fight too." "Eliza, this ain't—" "You taught me to rope. You taught me to stand my ground against wolves. You think I'm gonna sit here safe and warm while you risk your life?" Her eyes flashed. "I'm not that kind of woman, Jake Mercer. I'm not the kind who lets others do the hard work while I hide." Jake looked at her, at this woman who'd walked 40 miles through a blizzard once before, who'd stood beside him against wolves and town gossip and her own broken past, and knew he couldn't stop her, even if he tried. "Stay close," he said roughly. "We lose sight of each other in this, we're all dead." They loaded the sled with hay bales and set out into the white. The wind hit like fists, snow so thick Jake couldn't see his own hands. They followed the fence line by feel, stumbling, gasping, the cold so sharp it burned their lungs with every breath. An hour passed, then 2. The world became nothing but white and wind, and the desperate need to keep moving. Jake's face went numb. His fingers stopped working properly. Behind him, he heard Eliza coughing, struggling. "Keep moving," he shouted over the wind. "Don't stop." Finally, miraculously, they reached the far pasture. The cattle huddled together in a tight mass, ice crusting their hides. Jake and Tommy began distributing hay while Eliza counted heads. 38, she called. 4 missing. "Probably dead and adrift somewhere," Jake shouted back. "Nothing we can do for them now." They worked until the hay was gone and the cattle were eating. Then came the brutal journey home. They made it maybe a mile before Eliza broke through the ice. Jake heard her scream a sound, cut off abruptly, and spun around. She'd vanished. One moment she was behind him, the next she was gone, swallowed by the snow and the hidden creek that ran through the lower pasture. "Eliza!" Jake lunged toward where she'd been, Tommy grabbing his coat to anchor him. The snow gave way beneath Jake's feet. He plunged into black water so cold it stopped his heart. His hand found fabric, Eliza's coat, and he grabbed with everything he had. Tommy hauled from above, and together they dragged Eliza from the creek. She came up gasping, eyes wide with shock, already shaking violently. Ice formed in her hair instantly. "Move!" Jake pulled her forward, half carrying her. "Tommy, the line shack, half-mile south." They stumbled through the blizzard, Jake supporting Eliza's weight, while Tommy broke trail ahead. She was shaking so hard, her teeth rattled. Her lips had gone blue. Jake had seen men die of exposure in the war, knew exactly how fast hypothermia could kill. "Stay with me," he gasped into her ear. "Stay awake, Eliza. Talk to me." Cold," she managed. "I know. Keep moving. Just keep moving." The line shack appeared like a miracle through the white, a tiny shelter barely bigger than a horse stall used during calving season. Tommy kicked the door open, and they fell inside. Jake's hands shook so badly he could barely strike a match. The third try caught. He lit the kindling in the potbelly stove, threw in every piece of wood he could find. "Strip," he ordered Eliza. What? "Your clothes are frozen. You keep them on, you die. Strip, now." She tried, but her hands wouldn't work. Jake peeled off her coat, her dress, her soaked undergarments, trying to be clinical, trying not to think about the intimacy of it. Tommy turned his back, feeding the stove. Jake stripped his own wet layers, then wrapped Eliza in every blanket they had and pulled her against him. She was ice against his skin, shaking so hard he thought her bones might break. "Body heat," he said roughly, though he wasn't sure if he was explaining to her or to himself. "Only way to warm you fast enough." Tommy added himself to the pile of blankets, creating a cocoon of shared warmth. They huddled together while the storm raged outside and the tiny stove struggled to heat the frigid air. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Eliza's shaking began to ease. Color returned to her lips. Her breathing steadied. "I thought I was going to die," she whispered. "You didn't. Because you saved me. We saved each other. You counted the cattle. Tommy hauled us both out. That's how we survived out here together." Eliza turned her face against his chest, and Jake felt wetness that wasn't melted snow. She was crying again, but quietly, without the desperate edge of before. "I can't keep doing this," she said. "Doing what?" "Being a burden. Being the reason everything falls apart for you." Jake's arms tightened around her. "You ain't a burden. The town cut you off because of me. Your business is failing because of me. And now you nearly died trying to save me from my own stupidity." "Stop." Jake's voice was hard. "You fell through ice. That ain't stupidity. That's bad luck. And I didn't nearly die. I made a choice. Same choice I'd make again." "Why?" Her voice broke. "Why do you keep choosing me when it cost you everything?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, listening to the storm howl outside. Tommy had fallen asleep against the wall, exhausted. It was just the two of them awake in the tiny shack, wrapped together for warmth and survival. "You want the truth?" Jake asked quietly. "Yes. Because when Margaret left, she took something from me. Not just her presence, but my faith in the possibility of building something that lasts. I thought I was broken in a way that couldn't be fixed. Thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone in that house, going through the motions, waiting to die." Eliza was very still against him. "Then you knocked on my door in a blizzard?" Jake continued, his voice rough with emotion. "Half dead and still asking for work instead of charity. Still standing even though everything had tried to break you. And I thought maybe if you could keep standing, maybe I could too." "Jake, I ain't saying this right. What I mean is you didn't break me, Eliza. You started putting me back together. Every morning when I wake up and smell coffee brewing. Every evening when I hear you teaching Tommy to read. Every time you stand beside me instead of running. You make me believe that broken things can be whole again." Eliza pulled back just enough to look at his face. Her eyes were red from crying, her hair tangled and damp, but she'd never looked more beautiful to him. "I'm still broken," she whispered. "So am I." "Then maybe we're just two broken people pretending we can fix each other. Or maybe we're two broken people learning to be broken together. Which is better than being broken alone?" She laughed a small wet sound and pressed her forehead against his. "When did you become a philosopher?" "About the time I started caring more about your well-being than my own." The words hung between them, heavier than the blankets, more significant than the storm. "Jake, I need to tell you something. About Philadelphia. About why I really ran. You don't have to. I do. Because if we're going to be broken together, you deserve to know what you're getting." She took a shaking breath and Jake waited, giving her time. "My husband's name was Richard Hartford. He was a banker's son. Educated, respectable, everything my father thought I should want. We married when I was 22. I thought I was lucky." Her voice went flat, empty. "He was kind at first, attentive. But after our daughter was born, things changed. He started drinking. Started saying I wasn't good enough, not pretty enough, not obedient enough, not enough of anything. When Lily got sick with diphtheria, he blamed me. Said if I'd been a better mother, God wouldn't have punished us." Jake's hands curled into fists, but he stayed silent. After Lily died, it got worse. He'd come home drunk and angry. He never hit me where it would show, but he made sure I knew who was in charge, made sure I knew I deserved every bit of it. Eliza, let me finish, please. She swallowed hard. When he died, drunk, fell down the stairs, I felt relieved. Grateful. What kind of person feels grateful that their husband is dead? A person who survived something they shouldn't have had to survive. The debts came after. Turned out Richard had been gambling, borrowing against my father's shop, spending money we didn't have. The creditors came for everything. And when they couldn't get enough from selling our possessions, they suggested I could work off the debt in other ways. Her voice broke. Jake pulled her closer. One of them cornered me. Tried to force the issue. I hit him with a fire poker and ran. Took nothing but the clothes on my back and what money I had hidden. I walked for 6 days, stealing food, sleeping in barns. I heard cowboys talking about Wyoming, about how desperate ranchers were for help, so I kept walking. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. That's what you saved Jake. A woman who's a widow, a debtor, probably wanted for assault back in Philadelphia. A woman so broken she can barely stand most days. That's what you risked your reputation for. Jake cupped her face gently. You listen to me. That bastard who hurt you don't define you. The debts you didn't make don't define you. What defines you is walking 6 days through hell to find a better life. What defines you is standing beside me against wolves even though you were terrified. What defines you is teaching Tommy to read because you believe education matters. That's who you are. But what if I can't be whole again? What if I'm too broken? Then we'll be broken together. And maybe that's enough. Eliza kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't calculated. Just a desperate need for connection, for affirmation that she was still alive and still capable of feeling something other than fear. Jake kissed her back, gentle and careful, like she was something precious that might shatter. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jake rested his forehead against hers. We can't, he said roughly. Not like this. Not when you're vulnerable and scared and we're half frozen in a line shack. Why not? Because when we do this, if we do this, I want it to be a choice you make when you're strong, not when you're desperate. I want you to choose me, because you want to, not because you need to. Eliza nodded slowly, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. You're a better man than I deserve. You deserve better than what you've had, and I aim to give it to you if you'll let me. I'm scared. Me too. They held each other while the storm raged outside, two broken people trying to keep each other warm in more ways than one. By morning, the blizzard had passed. They dressed in their dried clothes and made the cold journey home, Tommy leading the way. None of them spoke about what had happened in the line shack. Some things were too fragile to survive scrutiny. But when they reached the ranch house, Eliza's hand found Jake's and held it, and he didn't let go. News of the blizzard reached town within days, carried by travelers who'd weathered the storm, and talked about the 3 fools from the Mercer Ranch who'd risked their lives to save cattle. The story grew in the telling, became about how Jake and his people had nearly died, about how they'd survived through sheer determination. Nathaniel Graves saw an opportunity. He arrived at the ranch 3 days after the storm, riding up with Reverend Price and 2 church elders. Jake met them in the yard, his face hard. Come to check if we survived, Jake asked coldly. Come to offer Christian charity in your time of need, Graves replied smoothly. We heard about your ordeal. The church has taken up a collection, food supplies funds to help you through this difficult winter. Jake stared at the small chest Graves held out. Inside he could see coins, bills, bags of grain. What's the price? Jake asked. Price? Ain't no such thing as free money from you, Graves. What do you want? Graves smiled his thin smile. Simply that you send Mrs. Hartford to town. The church ladies have found her respectable employment at the hotel. She'll be properly supervised, properly housed, and you'll be free of the burden and the scandal. So the price is Eliza. The price is propriety, Mr. Mercer. Surely you can see this is the best solution for everyone. You get the help you need, she gets respectable work, and the town's concerns are addressed. Jake looked at the chest, thought about his dwindling supplies, his mounting debts, the cattle he'd lost. Thought about how much easier life would be if he just took the money and sent Eliza away. Then he thought about her hand in his, about the way she'd stood beside him in the blizzard, about her tears in the line shack when she'd finally told him the truth. "No," Jake said. "Mr. Mercer, be reasonable." I said no. Take your charity and your conditions and get off my land. Reverend Price stepped forward. Jake, pride goeth before a fall. The church is trying to help. The church is trying to control. There's a difference. Jake's voice was hard. Eliza stays. Not because I need her, but because she belongs here. And if that offends your sensibilities, that's your problem, not mine. Graves's face went red. You're making a grave mistake, Mercer. The town won't support a man who refuses Christian charity out of stubborn pride and sinful attachment. Then the town can go to hell, again. You'll lose everything. Maybe. But I won't lose my integrity. Now get off my property before I help you off. Graves stared at Jake for a long moment, something dark and cold in his eyes. Then he turned to Reverend Price. You see, this is what moral decay looks like. A man so corrupted by his own desires that he'd rather starve than do the right thing. Reverend Price looked troubled, but he followed Graves back to their horses. As they rode away, Graves called back one last time. You had your chance, Mercer. What happens next is on your own head. Jake stood in the yard long after they'd gone, his heart hammering. He'd just refused help that could save his ranch. Refused it because the price was too high. Behind him, the door opened. Eliza stepped out wrapped in her winter coat. I heard, she said quietly. I'm sorry. I know that was stupid. I know we need the help. Don't apologize. Eliza crossed to him, took his hands. You chose me over survival. Again. Nobody's ever done that before. Maybe they should have. Maybe. But they didn't. You did. She looked up at him, her eyes clear and certain. Jake Mercer, I'm choosing you back. Not because I'm desperate. Not because I need to. But because I want to. Because you make me believe I can be whole again. Jake pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. We might lose everything, he said into her hair. Then we'll lose it together. The town will destroy us. Let them try. I've been destroyed before. I'm still standing. Eliza. She pulled back, looked him in the eye. I love you, Jake Mercer. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you gave me that coat, maybe when you stood up to the town, maybe when you pulled me from the frozen creek. But I love you, and I'm staying. Jake's breath caught. I love you too. God help me, I do. He kissed her properly this time, not desperate or careful, but certain. A kiss that tasted like promises and second chances and the stubborn refusal to let the world win. When they pulled apart, Tommy was standing in the doorway grinning. About damn time, he said. Inside the house the fire crackled. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and somewhere in town, Nathaniel Graves plotted his final move against the people who'd dared to defy him. But in that moment, standing in the snow with Eliza in his arms, Jake Mercer felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Hope lasted exactly 3 days before Nathaniel Graves struck back with a precision that took Jake's breath away. The letter arrived on a Monday morning, delivered by a nervous-looking clerk from the territorial court in Cheyenne. Jake opened it at the kitchen table while Eliza poured coffee and Tommy fed the stove. What is it? Eliza asked, seeing Jake's face go white. Lawsuit. Jake's voice was hollow. Graves is suing me for breach of moral conduct. Says my behavior violates community standards, and he's seeking an injunction to have you removed from the property by court order." "He can't do that," Tommy said. "He can if he gets a judge to agree, and the territorial judge is his brother-in-law." Jake crumpled the letter in his fist. "Court date's in 2 weeks. If I don't show up, he wins by default. If I do show up and lose, they'll force you to leave Eliza. Might even fine me enough to take the ranch." Eliza sank into a chair, her face pale. "This is it then. This is how he destroys you." "No." Jake's voice was hard. "This is how he tries. Jake, you can't fight this. You don't have money for a lawyer. The judge is on his side. The whole town is on his side. Then I'll represent myself. Against a banker who probably has the best lawyer in the territory." Eliza shook her head. "That's suicide." "Maybe, but I ain't going down without a fight." Tommy stood abruptly. "Boss, I got an idea. What if we go to Cheyenne ourselves? Talk to people who don't know. Graves don't owe him nothing. Find folks who might listen." "What folks?" Jake asked wearily. "I don't know. Newspaper. Cattlemen's Association. Somebody's got to care about a man's right to run his own property without the church breathing down his neck." It was a slim hope, but it was hope nonetheless. Jake nodded slowly. "We leave tomorrow, early." That night, Jake found Eliza in her room packing a small bag. She looked up when he entered, her eyes red from crying. "I'm coming with you," she said before he could speak. "Don't try to stop me." "I wasn't going to. You should be there. It's your life they're trying to control." "No, Jake. It's your life, your ranch, your reputation. I'm just the excuse they're using to destroy you." Her voice broke. "If I left right now tonight, this would all go away. You could keep your ranch, keep your standing in the community. I don't want standing in a community that treats people like you as disposable. But you'd have a future. I don't want a future without you in it." Eliza crossed to him, took his hands. "You say that now. But what happens when the judge rules against you? When they take your ranch? When you're left with nothing because you chose me?" "Then I'm left with nothing and you, which is better than everything and being alone." "Jake, listen to me." He cupped her face gently. "I spent 3 years alone in this house after Margaret left. 3 years going through the motions, working myself half to death just so I'd be too tired to feel anything. That ain't living. That's just waiting to die. You changed that. You made me want to wake up in the morning, want to come home at night, want to build something that lasts. But what if we can't build it? What if Graves wins and we lose everything? Then we start over, together. We'll go to California, Oregon, hell, we'll go to Canada if we have to, but we'll do it together." Eliza kissed him, then desperate and fierce, like she was trying to memorize the taste of him. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. "Stop saying that. You deserve everything I can give you and more." They stood holding each other until the lamp burned low and the house grew cold. Tomorrow, they'd ride to Cheyenne. Tomorrow, they'd face Graves and his lawyers and a system designed to break people like them. But tonight, they had each other. The ride to Cheyenne took 2 days through bitter cold and treacherous roads. They stayed in a cheap boarding house that smelled of boiled cabbage and unwashed humanity. Jake spent the first evening in the public library reading law books by candlelight until his eyes burned trying to understand the legal maze they'd stepped into. Tommy went to the stockyards and talked to ranch hands, asking questions, feeling out the territory. Eliza walked the streets, noting which businesses seemed prosperous, which seemed struggling, trying to understand the lay of the land. On the second evening, Tommy came back with news. "Found something interesting, boss. There's a widow woman named Catherine Brennan runs a boarding house on 5th Street. She's got a reputation for taking in women who need help, widows, women running from bad situations. She's fought off the church ladies more than once." "How's that help us?" Jake asked. "She might testify, might tell the judge that not every woman who needs help is a fallen woman, might give Eliza some credibility." It was another slim hope, but Jake was collecting those like other men collected coins. He and Eliza went to 5th Street that evening and knocked on Catherine Brennan's door. The woman who answered was in her 60s, tall and rail-thin, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. "If you're selling something, I ain't buying," she said. "We're not selling anything, ma'am," Jake said, removing his hat. "We're looking for help." Catherine looked them over, Jake in his worn ranch clothes, Eliza in her plain dress and second-hand coat, and something in her expression softened. "Come in before you freeze to death." Inside the house was warm and clean, filled with the smell of bread baking. 3 other women sat in the parlor doing needlework. They looked up with curious but not unfriendly eyes. Catherine led Jake and Eliza to a small office and gestured for them to sit. "Talk," she said. So they did. Jake explained about Eliza arriving at his ranch, about hiring her as housekeeper, about the town's reaction and Graves' lawsuit. Eliza, her voice shaking, but steady, told about Philadelphia, about Richard, about running. When they finished, Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "You love her?" she asked Jake directly. "Yes, ma'am." "You love him?" she asked Eliza. "Yes." "Then what do you need from me?" "The truth," Jake said. "If you'll testify at the hearing, tell the judge that helping women in need ain't immoral, that giving someone work and shelter don't make them a fallen woman or me a sinner." Catherine smiled, but it was a hard smile. "You know what'll happen if I do, that Graves will come after me next. The church will call me a corrupting influence. They'll try to shut down my boarding house. I know, and I got no right to ask. I didn't say I wouldn't do it." Catherine stood, walked to her desk, pulled out a sheaf of papers. "I've been fighting Nathaniel Graves and his kind for 10 years. Every woman in this house is someone the church wanted to lock up or throw out. I've testified before. I'll testify again." Jake felt something loosen in his chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Graves is smart and he's mean. He'll twist everything you say, make you look like sinners and reprobates. You prepared for that?" "No," Jake admitted. "But I'm willing to try." Catherine nodded approvingly. "Good. Honest is better than clever when you're facing a man like Graves. Stick to the truth. Don't let him bait you into anger. And for God's sake, let your woman speak for herself. Judges like her pretty and well-spoken, they'll listen to her in ways they won't listen to you." She looked at Eliza. "You ready to tell your story? All of it in front of a courtroom full of strangers." Eliza's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "If it helps Jake keep his ranch, I'll tell them anything they want to know. It won't be easy. They'll make you feel small, dirty, like you deserved what happened to you. I've felt that way for 2 years. I can handle one more day of it." Catherine smiled, and this time it was warm. "You're stronger than you know, girl. Hold on to that." The hearing was held in a drafty courtroom that smelled of old wood and older grudges. Judge William Hendricks presided, a man in his late 50s with a face like weathered granite and eyes that gave away nothing. Nathaniel Graves sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Morrison, who'd come all the way from Denver. They'd dressed for war in fine suits and polished shoes, papers stacked neatly, confident smiles in place. Jake sat at the defendant's table with Eliza beside him and Tommy behind them for moral support. Jake wore his Sunday suit carefully mended by Eliza. She wore her best dress borrowed from Catherine Brennan. They looked like exactly what they were, working people trying to survive in a world built for men like Graves. Morrison opened with a performance that would have impressed a theater audience. He painted Jake as a moral degenerate who'd taken advantage of a vulnerable woman. Painted Eliza as either a fool or a woman of loose morals, possibly both. Painted the situation as a clear violation of community standards that required judicial intervention. "Your Honor," Morrison concluded, "we're not asking for punishment. We're asking for protection. Protection for this woman from a situation that compromises her virtue. Protection for the community from the scandal this arrangement creates, and protection for Mr. Mercer from his own poor judgment." Judge Hendricks looked at Jake. "Mr. Mercer, you're representing yourself." "Yes, Your Honor." Do you have anything to say before I hear testimony? Jake stood, his heart hammering. He'd rehearsed this 100 times in his head, but now that the moment was here, all his careful words evaporated. Your Honor, I hired Mrs. Hartford because she needed work and I needed help. She's been nothing but respectable, hard-working, and honest. The only impropriety here is Mr. Graves using the court system to punish people for not living the way he thinks they should. Morrison smirked. Your Honor, Mr. Mercer's opinion on propriety is not exactly authoritative, given that his own wife left him. Objection, Jake said, though he wasn't sure that was the right legal term. My previous marriage ain't relevant to whether Mrs. Hartford should be forced off my property. Sustained, Judge Hendricks said, looking irritated. Mr. Morrison, stick to the case at hand. Morrison called his first witness Martha Davis, the mayor's wife. She testified about the town's concerns about how Jake and Eliza's arrangement violated social norms, about how it set a bad example for young people. Jake cross-examined her carefully, the way he'd read about in the law books. Mrs. Davis, have you ever been to my ranch? No. Ever spoken to Mrs. Hartford directly? No. So your testimony is based on gossip, not personal knowledge. I'm reporting the community's concerns. The community's gossip, you mean. Mr. Mercer, Judge Hendricks warned, ask questions, don't editorialize. Jake nodded and sat down. Morrison called 3 more witnesses, each one testifying to the scandal, the impropriety, the danger to public morals. Each time Jake asked the same questions. Have you been to the ranch? Have you spoken to Mrs. Hartford? Is your testimony based on facts or rumors? Each time the answer was the same. Then Morrison called Reverend Samuel Price. Price took the stand, looking deeply uncomfortable. Morrison led him through questions about Christian morality, proper conduct, the importance of avoiding even the appearance of sin. Reverend Price, Morrison said smoothly, in your professional opinion, is it appropriate for an unmarried man and woman to live under the same roof? Price hesitated. Generally speaking, no. It invites temptation. And in this specific case, Price looked at Jake, then at Eliza, and something in his expression shifted. I can't speak to this specific case, he said slowly. I've never visited the Mercer Ranch, never spoken to Mrs. Hartford beyond a greeting in town. I can tell you what the Bible says about propriety, but I can't tell you what's in these people's hearts. Morrison looked annoyed. But surely you agree that the situation is improper. I agree it's unusual. I don't know if it's improper. Reverend Price? I've been a minister for 20 years, Mr. Morrison. I've seen true sin, and I've seen good people trying their best in difficult circumstances. I ain't convinced this situation is the former. Graves actually stood up. Your Honor, this witness is clearly— Sit down, Mr. Graves, Judge Hendricks said tiredly. You're not the one on trial here. Jake's turn to present his case came after lunch. He called Tommy first. Tommy testified about life at the ranch, about how Eliza kept house, and taught reading lessons about how they all worked together and treated each other with respect. Morrison tried to shake him on cross-examination, but Tommy stuck to his story with stubborn honesty. Then Jake called Catherine Brennan. Catherine took the stand like she owned it, her spine straight, her voice clear. Mrs. Brennan, Jake said, you run a boarding house for women in Cheyenne, is that correct? Yes. What kind of women? Widows, women running from bad situations, women who need a safe place to rebuild their lives. Do you believe Mrs. Hartford is a woman of loose morals? I believe Mrs. Hartford is a woman who survived something terrible and had the courage to keep going. That ain't loose morals. That's strength. Morrison objected, called it opinion, not fact, but Judge Hendricks allowed it. Jake asked Catherine about the women she'd helped, about how society judged them, about how hard it was for women alone to find honest work. Catherine answered every question with calm authority, painting a picture of a world that was harder on women than anyone wanted to admit. When Morrison cross-examined her, he tried to suggest her boarding house was a cover for prostitution. Catherine looked at him like he was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. "Mr. Morrison, if you're suggesting my house is a brothel, you're welcome to bring evidence of that claim to court. But be warned, I've got lawyers too, and I don't take kindly to slander." Morrison backed off quickly. Finally, Jake called Eliza. She walked to the stand with her head high, though Jake could see her hands shaking. She swore on the Bible and sat down, her eyes finding Jake's across the courtroom. "Mrs. Hartford," Jake said gently, "will you tell the court how you came to be at my ranch?" Eliza took a breath and began to speak. She told them about Philadelphia, about Richard, about the debts and the creditors, and the man who'd tried to force her. Told them about walking for 6 days with nothing but stolen bread and frozen creek water. Told them about knocking on Jake's door half dead from exposure and asking for work. "Why didn't you ask for charity?" Jake asked. "Because I wanted to earn my place in the world. Wanted to prove I was worth something despite everything I'd lost." "And did you earn your place?" "I tried. Every day I tried. But it was never enough for people like Mr. Graves. To him, I'm just a scandal waiting to happen. A woman who needs to be controlled and supervised and told what to do." Morrison objected, but the damage was done. The courtroom had heard the pain in Eliza's voice, seen the tears she was trying not to shed. When Morrison cross-examined her, he was brutal. Asked about her marriage, her husband's debts, the man she'd hit with the fire poker. Tried to make her sound violent, unstable, a danger to herself and others. "Mrs. Hartford, isn't it true that you assaulted a man in Philadelphia?" "I defended myself from a man trying to rape me." "That's your version of events." "That's what happened." Eliza's voice was steel. "And if given the same choice again, I'd do it again. No woman should have to trade her body to pay debts she didn't make." "But you did run from your legal obligations." "I ran from men who thought they owned me because my husband died. I ran from a city that judged me for surviving. And I kept running until I found a place that judged me for my work, not my past." Morrison tried several more angles, but Eliza held firm. By the time he finished, she was shaking but unbowed. Judge Hendricks called for closing arguments. Morrison gave another polished speech about community standards and moral decay. Jake stood and spoke from the heart about fairness, about judging people by their actions, about the right to offer help without being punished for it. Then, Judge Hendricks retired to his chambers to deliberate. The wait was agony. Jake sat with Eliza and Tommy in the hallway outside the courtroom, watching the afternoon light fade through grimy windows. Graves and Morrison sat on the opposite side, confident and relaxed. Catherine Brennan brought them coffee and sat with them for a while. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "you did good in there, both of you." "Will it be enough?" Eliza asked. "With judges, you never know, but you told the truth. Sometimes that matters." After 3 hours, they were called back in. Judge Hendricks looked tired. He shuffled papers, cleared his throat, and began to speak. "This court has considered the testimony and evidence presented. Mr. Graves, your concern for community standards is noted. However, I find no evidence that Mr. Mercer or Mrs. Hartford have violated any law. Moral impropriety is not in itself illegal. Private arrangements between consenting adults where no fraud or coercion is present are not subject to judicial intervention." Jake felt his heart starting to beat again. "That said," Hendricks continued, "I am troubled by certain aspects of this situation. Mrs. Hartford, you are a woman alone, vulnerable, potentially subject to pressures that might compromise your judgment. Mr. Mercer, you are in a position of power over Mrs. Hartford as her employer." Jake's brief hope died. "Therefore, I am ordering the following. Mrs. Hartford may continue to reside at the Mercer Ranch only if the following conditions are met. First, Mr. Mercer must provide Mrs. Hartford with separate lockable quarters with independent access. Second, Mrs. Hartford must be paid a fair wage documented and verified by this court quarterly. Third, Mrs. Hartford must have access to independent counsel should she wish to leave the arrangement at any time." Hendricks looked at them both sternly. "These conditions are designed to protect Mrs. Hartford's autonomy and dignity. If Mr. Mercer cannot or will not meet them, then I will order Mrs. Hartford's removal to alternative housing in Cheyenne. Mr. Mercer, can you meet these conditions? Yes, Your Honor, Jake said immediately. Mrs. Hartford, do you consent to this arrangement? I do, Your Honor. Then this court finds in favor of the defendant. Case dismissed. The gavel came down. Jake and Eliza sat frozen for a moment, unable to believe it was over. Then Eliza began to cry great gasping sobs of relief. Jake pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw. Behind them, Graves slammed his papers down and stalked out, Morrison following. They'd lost, and everyone knew it. Catherine Brennan squeezed Jake's shoulder. Congratulations. Now comes the hard part, living with it. Outside the courthouse, the winter sun was setting, painting the snow pink and gold. Jake, Eliza, and Tommy stood on the steps, breathing in the cold, clean air of freedom. We won, Eliza said, like she couldn't quite believe it. We survived, Jake corrected. Winning comes later. What now? Tommy asked. Jake looked at Eliza, at this woman who'd walked through fire and come out the other side still standing. Now we go home, he said, and we build something that lasts. They rode out of Cheyenne the next morning, the court's ruling tucked safely in Jake's saddlebag. The journey home was quieter, each of them processing what had happened, what it meant. Halfway back, Eliza spoke up. Jake, the judge's conditions, the separate quarters, the documented wages, we should do all that anyway. Not because he ordered it, but because it's right. I know. I mean it. I don't want to be with you because I'm dependent on you. I want to be with you because I choose you. Every day. Jake reined in his horse, turned to look at her. What are you saying? I'm saying that when the time is right, when we're both sure this is what we want, we'll do it proper. Marriage, partnership, everything. But until then, I want to earn my own way. Want to know I can stand on my own 2 feet. Tommy, riding ahead, called back. You two know I can hear you, right? They both laughed, the sound bright and clear in the cold air. All right, Jake said. We'll do it your way. But Eliza, I'm already sure. So am I. But let's build it right this time. No shortcuts, no desperation. Just 2 people choosing each other with clear eyes and steady hearts. Jake nodded, and they rode on toward home. Behind them, Cheyenne faded into the distance. Ahead, the ranch waited. And somewhere between the past they were leaving and the future they were building, Jake Mercer and Eliza Hartford found something that felt like peace. Spring came to Wyoming the way it always did, reluctant and slow, like it wasn't quite sure winter had finished its business. The snow melted in patches, revealing dead grass that would green up in time. The creek ran high and fast with runoff. The cattle, gaunt from the hard winter, began to fill out as fresh grazing appeared. Jake spent the first weeks of March rebuilding. He converted the old tack room in the barn into proper quarters for Eliza, separate entrance, wood stove, a real bed he bought from a traveling merchant who didn't know about the town's boycott. He installed a lock on the inside of the door, even though they both knew she'd never use it. Eliza kept meticulous records of her wages, writing down every cent in a ledger she'd bought with her first month's pay. $2 a week, just like Jake had promised that first night. She saved most of it, keeping the money in a tin box under her bed. When Tommy asked what she was saving for, she just smiled and said, "Independence." The town's attitude shifted like weather, gradual but unmistakable. The court ruling had embarrassed Graves, made him look petty and vindictive. Some folks began to question whether they'd been wrong about Jake and Eliza. Others stayed cold, but their numbers dwindled as spring progressed. Bessie Garrett was the first to break ranks openly. She showed up at the ranch on a Sunday afternoon with a basket of preserves and an apology. "I should have stood up sooner," she told Eliza. "Should have told Graves to go to hell when he started his crusade. I was scared, and fear makes cowards of us all." Eliza took the preserves with grace. "Fear is honest, at least. It's the self-righteousness that does the real damage." "You're kinder than I deserve." "No, I'm just tired of being angry. It's exhausting." Bessie nodded, understanding in her eyes. Before she left, she pressed a piece of paper into Jake's hand. List of folks in town who want to do business again. Quietly for now, but it's a start. The list had 12 names on it. Not everyone, but enough. Word spread that the Mercer Ranch was no longer under boycott. Slowly, cautiously, the normal rhythms of commerce resumed. The feed store reopened its doors. The blacksmith took Jake's business. Even the doctor stopped by to check on Eliza, who'd developed a persistent cough from her time in the frozen creek. "Lungs sound clear," Doc Patterson said, packing up his bag. "But you need to take it easy for a while. No heavy lifting, no working yourself into exhaustion." "I'll make sure she rests," Jake said. "You better. She's too stubborn to do it herself." Doc Patterson paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Mercer, I'm glad the judge ruled the way he did. Graves had no business trying to run your life." "Appreciate that, Doc." After he left, Eliza turned to Jake. "See? The world didn't end. We survived. We did more than survive. We won." "No," Eliza corrected gently. "We're still winning. Every day we wake up and choose this, we win again." That night, Jake sat at his desk working through the ranch's finances. The winter had been brutal, 4 cattle lost supplies, depleted debts mounting. But with trade resuming and spring coming, he could see a path forward. It would be tight, require careful management and some luck, but it was possible. Eliza appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "You'll go blind working by lamplight," she said. "Just trying to figure out how to make the numbers work." She set down the coffee and looked at the ledger. "You're short for the spring seed purchase." "I know. I'm trying to figure out where to cut." "What if you didn't cut? What if you invested instead?" Jake looked at her confused. "In what?" Eliza pulled out her tin box and set it on the desk. Inside were neat stacks of bills and coins, her saved wages. "In your future. Our future." She pushed the box toward him. "Use this for the seed. I'll earn it back in wages, and when harvest comes, we'll both profit." "Eliza, I can't take your money." "It's not taking if I'm investing. You taught me that a person's worth is measured by what they contribute, not what they take. So let me contribute." Jake stared at the money, his throat tight. "This is everything you've saved." "Not everything. It's just money. But what we're building here, this ranch, this life, that's everything. And I want to invest in it." He looked at her, this woman who'd arrived half-frozen and desperate, now standing before him with clear eyes and steady hands, offering him not charity, but partnership. "All right," he said roughly. "But we do this proper. I'll draw up papers, make you a partner in the ranch, 20% to start more as we build." "Jake, that's too much. It ain't enough. Not for what you've given me." Eliza's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "You're going to make me cry again. You cry a lot these days." "These are different tears, better ones." They drew up the partnership papers that night, both signing with hands that shook slightly. It wasn't marriage, but it was commitment. It was choosing each other in a way that mattered. Tommy witnessed the signing with a grin. "About time you two made it official." "This ain't a wedding," Jake said. "No, it's better. It's a business partnership built on trust. Wedding's just words in a church. This is words on paper backed by cold hard cash." Eliza laughed. "Tommy Chen, when did you become a romantic?" "I ain't romantic, I'm practical. And practically speaking, you two are building something real here." April brought warmer weather and unexpected visitors. A family from the next valley over the Johnsons showed up asking if Eliza would teach their 3 children to read. They'd heard about her teaching Tommy and wanted the same for their kids. "We can pay Mrs. Johnson said quickly. "Not much, but we can pay." Eliza looked at Jake, hope and uncertainty warring in her eyes. "It's your decision," he said. "I'll teach them, but I won't take payment. Education shouldn't cost what people can't afford." "That's charity," Mr. Johnson said stiffly. "We don't take charity. Then pay me in kind. Eggs, vegetables, whatever you can spare. Fair trade, not charity. The Johnsons agreed. Within a week, 2 more families had approached Eliza. By the end of April, she was teaching 8 children 3 afternoons a week in the ranch house parlor. Jake watched her come alive in ways he'd never seen. She was patient with the slow learners, encouraging with the quick ones, fierce in her belief that every child deserved education. The children adored her. Their parents respected her. And slowly, quietly, Eliza Hartford was building a reputation based on her own merit, not on gossip or judgment. One evening, after the last student had left, Eliza stood at the window, watching the sunset paint the hills gold and purple. "I never thought I'd have this," she said softly. "Have what? Purpose. A reason to wake up that isn't just survival. I spent 2 years just trying to get through each day. Now I'm building toward something." Jake crossed to her, stood beside her at the window. "You're good at it. Teaching. I love it. These children, they're hungry for knowledge in a way I never was at their age. They know education is their ticket to something better. Like you knew walking 40 miles through a blizzard was your ticket to something better." She glanced at him, surprised. "I didn't know that. I just knew I couldn't stay where I was." "Same thing. You were moving toward possibility, even if you couldn't see what it looked like yet." Eliza leaned her head against his shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" "About the time I got so desperate I'd hire a half-frozen stranger who knocked on my door asking for work." They stood together. As the light faded, 2 people who'd found each other in the dark and chosen to walk toward the light together. May arrived with apple blossoms, and the kind of hope that comes from surviving winter. The cattle were thriving. The spring calves were strong and healthy. The crops Jake had planted with Eliza's investment money were sprouting green and promising. And Nathaniel Graves finally made his last move. He arrived at the ranch on a Tuesday morning alone this time, no lawyers or church elders for backup. Jake met him in the yard, wary. "Come to serve more papers?" Jake asked. "Come to admit defeat," Graves said. His face was haggard, older than Jake remembered. "The church council voted me out last week. Said I'd become too focused on judgment, not enough on mercy." Jake waited, saying nothing. Reverend Price gave the sermon about the Pharisees, about men who follow the letter of the law but miss the spirit of it, about how being right ain't the same as being righteous. Graves looked away. "He was talking about me." Seems like he had cause. He did. Graves took a breath. "I came to apologize. To you and to Mrs. Hartford. What I did, the lawsuit, the boycott, trying to destroy your life, it wasn't about morality. It was about control. About making the world fit into boxes I could understand and manage." "Why?" Jake asked. "Why did you care so much about what we did?" Graves was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "My wife, Helen, she died 5 years ago. Childbirth. The baby died too. Afterward, people said I should have gotten the doctor sooner, should have done more, should have been a better husband. The guilt near killed me." He looked at Jake with eyes full of old pain. "When you hired Mrs. Hartford, when people started talking, I saw it happening again. Saw a man making choices that could destroy him, that could lead to judgment and loss. And I thought if I could stop you from making those mistakes, maybe I could prove to myself that I wasn't wrong about Helen, that sometimes controlling the situation is the right thing to do." Jake understood then. Understood that Graves wasn't evil, just broken in a different way. Broken, and trying to make sense of a senseless world by imposing order on other people's chaos. You can't control life, Graves. You can only live it. I know that now. Cost me my position, my reputation, and near about my sanity to learn it, but I know it now. Graves straightened. "I don't expect forgiveness. Don't deserve it. Just wanted you to know I'm done fighting you. You won. You and Mrs. Hartford, you won." Before Jake could respond, Eliza emerged from the house. She'd been listening from the doorway. She crossed the yard and stood beside Jake, her presence a quiet solidarity. "Mr. Graves," she said evenly. "Mrs. Hartford, I owe you an apology as well. I treated you as a scandal instead of a person, made your pain into gossip. That was wrong." Eliza studied him for a long moment. "Did you love your wife?" Graves looked startled by the question. "More than anything." "Then I understand why you tried to control everything after she died. When you lose someone you love, the world stops making sense. You grab onto whatever gives you a feeling of control, even if it hurts other people." "That's no excuse." "It's not an excuse. It's an explanation. And I can forgive an explanation." She paused. "My husband hurt me, and when he died I felt relief. That guilt ate at me for 2 years, made me think I deserved every bad thing that happened. But Jake taught me that we all carry guilt we don't deserve, and we all deserve grace we haven't earned." Graves's eyes were wet. "You're more charitable than I deserve." "Probably. But charity's a gift, not a reward. You don't earn it, you just accept it." Graves nodded, unable to speak. He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, you've built something good here. Something worth protecting. I hope you both find the happiness I lost." After he rode away, Jake turned to Eliza. "That was generous of you." "It was necessary. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I'm tired of being poisoned by the past." "You're a better person than I am." "No, I just know what it's like to need forgiveness. And I know what it costs to give it." Summer arrived with heat and growth, and the kind of abundance that makes hard winters feel like distant memories. The crops flourished. The cattle multiplied. Eliza's school grew to 15 students. Tommy learned to read well enough to tackle actual books and spent evenings devouring dime novels about cowboys and outlaws. On a Sunday in late June, Jake and Eliza rode to the ridge where they'd first met, where she'd climbed through the snow, desperate and determined to knock on a stranger's door. "Feels like a lifetime ago," Eliza said, looking down at the ranch house in the valley below. 7 months, not even a full year. A lifetime can happen in 7 months. Death, rebirth, everything in between. Jake dismounted and helped her down. They stood together on the ridge, the wind gentle and warm carrying the smell of wild grass and possibility. "I want to ask you something," Jake said. "Yes." He laughed. "You don't know what I'm asking yet." "Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, the answer is yes." Jake pulled a small wooden box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band, no stone, just smooth metal polished to a shine. "My mother's ring," he said. "Only valuable thing I own that ain't tied to the ranch. I want you to have it. Not as payment, not as obligation. As a promise." Eliza's breath caught. "I know we said we'd wait, said we'd build this right with clear eyes and steady hearts. And I think we have. We're partners in business, partners in life. But I want to be partners in everything. Legally, officially, permanently." "Jake, let me finish. You asked me once why I kept choosing you when it cost me everything. Truth is, choosing you didn't cost me anything. It gave me everything that matters. Purpose, hope, a future worth living. So I'm asking you, Eliza Hartford, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life choosing you every morning and every night?" Eliza took the ring from the box, held it up to the light. It was simple and honest, like everything about Jake Mercer, like everything they'd built together. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you, but on one condition." "Name it." "We do it here, on this ridge, where it all started. No church, no town, no judgment. Just us and the land and the people we choose to have with us. Deal." She slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. They married on the first Saturday in July, with Tommy and Bessie Garrett as witnesses and Reverend Price to speak the words. Catherine Brennan came all the way from Cheyenne with 3 of her boarding house ladies. The Johnson family came, and the other ranch families whose children Eliza taught. No one from town came except those who'd earned the right through loyalty and support. Nathaniel Graves wasn't invited, but he sent a letter of congratulations and a set of hand-embroidered linens that had belonged to his wife. Eliza wore a simple white dress that Bessie had helped her sew. Jake wore his Sunday suit. They stood on the ridge with the valley spread below them, the ranch house small and sturdy in the distance, and spoke vows that came from the heart rather than any book. "I promise to choose you," Jake said, "even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I promise to build with you, not for you. To stand beside you, not in front of you. To love you as my partner in all things. I promise to be honest with you," Eliza said, "even when the truth is difficult. I promise to trust you with my fear and my hope. To build something with you that's stronger than either of us alone. To love you not because I need you, but because I choose you." Reverend Price pronounced them husband and wife with tears in his eyes. "What God has joined together through trial and triumph, let no man put asunder." They kissed while the small crowd cheered. Tommy whooped. The children from Eliza's school threw wildflowers. And on that ridge, on that perfect summer day, two broken people became whole. The celebration lasted until sunset with food and music, and the kind of joy that comes from watching people you care about find happiness. As the guests began to leave, promising to visit soon, Jake and Eliza stood together, watching the light fade over their land. "Mrs. Mercer," Jake said, testing out the name. "Sounds strange. I'm still getting used to it." "You don't have to take my name if you don't want." "I want to. I want everything that comes with being your wife. The name, the partnership, the future. All of it." Tommy approached, leading his horse. "I'm gonna stay in town tonight. Give you two some privacy." Eliza hugged him. "Thank you, Tommy, for everything. For being there from the beginning. You two are gonna make me cry, and I ain't that kind of cowboy." But he was grinning as he mounted up. "See you tomorrow, boss. Mrs. Mercer." After everyone had gone, Jake and Eliza walked down from the ridge to the ranch house. The house that had been Jake's tomb became their home. The barn where Eliza had first struggled to lift hay bales now housed her school supplies. The land that had tried to kill them both now provided for them abundantly. Inside, Jake had prepared the room flowers on the table. Candles lit the wooden bird he'd carved years ago for his unborn daughter, now hanging above the mantel as a symbol of hope fulfilled. "I want to tell you something," Eliza said, taking his hands. "Something I've been holding on to." "What is it?" "I'm not afraid anymore. For the first time since Lily died, since Richard hurt me, since I ran from Philadelphia, I'm not afraid. I trust that tomorrow will come, and we'll face it together. I trust that we've built something strong enough to weather any storm. I trust you, and I trust myself." Jake pulled her close. "You know what that is. That's called being home." "Is that what this is, home?" "Home ain't a place, Eliza. It's a feeling. It's waking up and knowing you're where you belong. It's having someone to stand with when the wolves howl. It's building something with your own two hands and watching it grow. That's home, and you're mine." She kissed him soft and sure. And in that kiss was everything they'd survived and everything they'd become. They made love that night with tenderness and passion, two people who'd earned the right to be gentle with each other. No desperation, no fear, just the quiet certainty of choosing each other fully and completely. Afterward, lying in the dark with Eliza asleep against his chest, Jake thought about the journey that had brought them here. Thought about the woman who'd knocked on his door 7 months ago, half frozen and desperate. Thought about how he'd been dying slowly in this house, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. She'd saved him just as much as he'd saved her. Outside, the wolves howled in the distant hills, not a threat anymore, just wilderness singing its old song. Inside, the fire, crackled low. The wooden bird caught the firelight, casting shadows that looked like wings. Jake closed his eyes and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Something bigger than happiness, deeper than contentment. Peace. The ranch thrived. Eliza's school grew. Tommy met a girl in town and started courting her with all the awkward enthusiasm of a man who'd learned about romance from dime novels. The town that had tried to destroy them slowly accepted them, then respected them, then held them up as an example of what hard work and determination could build. Years passed. Children came, 3 of them, each one healthy and loud and loved. The ranch expanded. Eliza's school became official, funded by families across 3 valleys who wanted their children taught by the woman who'd turned adversity into purpose. And every year on their anniversary, Jake and Eliza climbed to the ridge where it all began, where a desperate woman had knocked on a lonely man's door, and both their lives had changed forever. They'd stand there holding hands, looking down at everything they'd built, everything they'd survived, everything they'd become. "Do you ever regret it?" Eliza asked once. "Choosing me over the easy path." Jake looked at his wife, at the silver threading through her auburn hair, at the laugh lines around her eyes, at the strength in her shoulders from years of hard work, and he smiled. "Every good thing worth having comes the hard way," he said. "And you, Eliza Mercer, were worth every hard step." She kissed him there on that ridge, with the wind gentle around them, and the valley spread below, and Jake Mercer knew with absolute certainty that some chances only come once, but when you're brave enough to take them, they change everything. They'd found more than wages at this ranch. They'd found purpose, partnership, love that was earned through trial and triumph. They'd found home, and that was worth more than all the gold in California, all the cattle in Wyoming, all the easy paths they'd never taken. That was worth everything.